Szanowni Państwo, bardzo proszę o zajmowanie miejsc. Zaczynamy.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are going to start the initial plenary session, Economic Forum 2020. Please take your seats and let us begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We are going to start the plenary session inaugurating the Economic Forum 2020.
Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. My name is Jakub Romaniuk. I'm the director of the Foundation Instytut Studiów Wschodnich, organizer of the Economic Forum, and it is my privilege and honor to invite you and to welcome you at the inauguration session opening the Economic Forum 2020. This year we are meeting in this very special place at this very special venue. However, the number of guests who are going to participate in our sessions proves how important it is to have an event like an Economic Forum. Like every year, we are having, many eminent personalities of the world of business, politics, and among them, I've got the special privilege to welcome Deputy Prime Minister Piotr Gliński. And this event could not have happened without our long partners, and therefore it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Witold Kozłowski, the Marshal of Małopolska Voivodeship, as well as the host of the Karpacz, the Mayor Władysław Jętek. And Marshal, the floor is yours. Dear respectable ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Programming Council of the Institute of Eastern Studies and local authorities of Małopolska Voivodeship, I would like to extend cordial welcome to you, participants in the Economic Forum. Today, we are meeting at Karpacz in Lower Silesian Voivodeship, but in a year's time, I, being the head of the Małopolska Voivodeship, would like to invite you very cordially to come to Krynica Górska in Małopolska region. Ladies and gentlemen, the Economic Forum has gained its existence and development. It owes a lot to Zygmunt Berdychowski, a man of wonderful energy and wonderful initiatives and wonderful spirit, a man of very high prestige, and he raises the level of organization of the forum, and he reached to such a summit that he gained the crown of the world. He also climbed the highest peaks on all of the continents, so he deserves applause, really. So, ladies and gentlemen, what makes this year's meeting an absolutely unique event, it is the topic of this forum, Europe after pandemia, solidarity, freedom, community. Ladies and gentlemen, the problems with which the world is coping had to become the subject of multi-thread discussion. And the Economic Forum is the first so numerous international meeting which is to serve, among others, to the reflection on what has happened and on what scenarios are to be predicted, envisaged for the future in search of the the face of the virus worldwide. And I do believe that our debates and exchange of views and expertise and experiences will become a source of knowledge to all of us, which will be very useful in the months and years to come in the combating, virus. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I extend cordial welcome once again to all of you who have come to this year's Economic Forum. And once again, I would like to wish you very fruitful and satisfactory debates in Karpacz. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister, head of the Voivodeship, ministers, speakers and today, the year 2020 is completely different compared to the reality we are used to, and change is the slogan. I, being the host of the city, am speaking to you, although many times as a guest of the Economic Forum, I dreamed of the perspectives of coping with the crisis, and I dreamed of having this meeting organized here in Karpacz, and I couldn't even dream that this dream would come true so quickly, but in so unexpected circumstances. And I would like to welcome you to the city of brave people, the city which is a leader of investments, and it is traditional tourism destination. And I do believe that this venue is going to be really contributing to debates on our common future. I would like to wish you very fruitful debates and exchange of information and fruitful and satisfactory contacts. I am bowing my head in front of the Małopolska heads, and thank you very much for your hospitality you share until now. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much to the head of thank you very much for your initial words during this opening session for the Economic Forum 2020. And at this point, I would like to invite you to listening to the plenary session opening this year's forum. The title is In Search of the Driving Force of the European Economy. And in this session, the eminent panelists will try to find an answer to the question, what is the direction for the economy, for the development of economy of our continent, and how the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the pathways, and what measures we need to adopt in order to develop in a very satisfactory way in our continent. And I would like to invite to the following speakers, the panelists. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economic Development, Mrs. Jadwiga Emilewicz. Let us applaud. And subsequent speaker is Mr. Igor Petraszko, Minister of the Ministry of Economic Development, Trade and Agriculture from Ukraine. I would like to invite Mr. Mark Boris Andrijanich, Head of Public Policy Central and Eastern Europe, Uber Poland. And I would like to welcome Mr. Włodzimierz Wlazlak, the CEO of Lidl Poland. And now I would like to give the floor to the moderator of this session, President of the Management Board of the Polish Development Fund, Mr. Paweł Borys. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend cordial welcome to all of you. I understand that I don't need to introduce the panelists. I would like to inform you that we have got very eminent guests for our panel, and taking into account the economic and social environment this year, we are going to be talking a lot about on how the pandemic has influenced the economics of Europe, and how to get back to the growth path as soon as possible. If I may utter a couple of words of introduction. Well, what has happened in the second quarter of this year was really unprecedented. We were witnessing one of the deepest reflections in our history, and let us hope that it will be the shortest, because everybody has been expecting, starting with the third quarter, of this year, the get back to the expansion and sustainable growth pathway. This crisis was really unprecedented, unique, and it really undermined the basics of economy, and we suffered from a shock on the demand side, and also supply chains were broken, and frozening of economy really resulted in consumers cutting their expenditures, and investments were cut by companies, and there were severe turbulences on financial markets, and also the intervention of central banks worldwide tried to prevent, and also another factor which is hardly manageable, the shock in confidence, both among companies and households, resulting from the threats for health. And this confidence is of critical importance in getting back to the growth path as soon as possible. So solidarity, freedom, community, these are the main words for these main topics of this forum. Because I would like us to talk about that, because during pandemia in recent months, these values became especially important, and there were very many challenges in this respect. Italy, which has suffered a lot during the crisis, Italy was really against the European Union, and they accused European Union of responding too slowly to the problem, and the issues of how to manage the pandemic from the point of view of new technologies and personal data access. And also it opens up the field for discussion on freedom, and also community which is undergoing a kind of a tests in terms of social distancing everybody talks about, and we keep apart from each other, from family members, from co-workers. We keep at a safe distance, and so these words are very important, these slogans are very important, and we need to recall them, and they may become a very important factor of growth or growth engine for our economy. And I would like to ask our guests, and starting with Deputy Prime Minister, Madam Jadwiga Emilewicz, the question is, how, in your opinion, is Europe going to tackle this, its social policy and economic policy and in the years to come? After the crisis of 2009, this decade was a kind of a lost decade, and there was a paradigm of austerity, the leveraging, and Germany was leading in these terms. They were cutting expenditures, and the growth of European economy was very slow. And in recent months, it has changed, it seems, and everybody understood the severity of the moment. And so what is your opinion, madam? Will Europe be brave enough? Will it have brave leaders to let European Union get through its efficiently, and will they help create the reconstruction plan, which is very much needed? Well, sir, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. It is one of the first congresses after the long period of quarantine and uncertainty, when we were only discussing using the remote communication technologies, screens of computers. And thank you very much for this question. It's very essential because it gets us back to the roots of Europe. And the question asked one of the journalists was, is European Union needed and will it survive? And the crisis time is the time of redefining the notions, the concepts. And you have presented the brief characteristics of this time, and which redefines many notions and concepts, not only of economy. And discussion is raised, well grounded. Why do we need European Union? What is it for? Is it needed to anyone? If we take Italy as an example, it was really challenged. The community was challenged, and the national states responded first, and the decisions of individual governments were taken first, and only then, only afterwards, all European decisions were taken. Poland is one of the most pro-European nations in Europe. When we get back to the roots of Europe, and the founders of Europe, and their writings, and we need to redefine this community again. No community is able to last if it is not based not on common interests but on common values, and the values which are in the slogan of this year's Krynica-Karpacz meeting are to be understood anew. European community solidarity and community starting from Greek philosophy and Roman law and Christianity, which has its source in Jerusalem, and only thanks to getting over the national egoism, selfishness. Well, we must go beyond that, and Europe needs to get back to its roots, needs to read the writings of founding fathers and read their writings in these times of crisis. When we look at the economic theories, well, it is probably the deepest, most profound crisis. And sometimes it is compared to the crisis of the 20s of 1929. It is a kind of comparable, but this crisis was much more profound, and one of the consequences of the crisis of 1929 was the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939. So we need to take a closer look, not only on the basis of economy, but also on a broader terms, and how to create resistance, and health is the main issue, and economy is another issue, the health in economy as well. So the political decisions were taken, which were really new, and we didn't have to take such decisions for the decade. And in March, April, the notion of a national debt stopped being a fetish, and for the very first time Europe decided to take the community loan, community debt, and the funds which are to reinstall the resistance and reconstruction are funds issuing from the issue of euro bonds. And for the very first time the European community decided to take a social intergenerational debt the loan which is to serve the justified cause. It is not the time for savings. In modern theories of economy, if we look at the development of economy starting with the Persian times, those who were developing the fastest, who were able to jump in it, were able to take loans and then to repay the loans. But this year is not the year of savings and fetish, making the debt a fetish or misery or carefulness of the last years could lead to consequences much more severe. It is hard to imagine what we would have to cope with in Poland if it was not for the anti-crisis shield prepared by Prime Minister, or economic shields, which started on 11th of March. We introduced the national quarantine, and starting with the 1st of April, the smallest companies didn't have to pay social security contributions and also contribution to payments to salaries, and also standstill payments were contributed by the government to maintain liquidity of small and medium-sized enterprises. And the Polish Development Fund also offers loans for medium-sized enterprises on privileged terms, 138 billion zlotys in assistance provided by the government, results in us looking with optimism into the future. And we have got the most shallow recession in Poland, especially in history of 30 years in Poland. These are the first 2 quarters of the technical recession. The -8 of the GDP, it is a lot, but it is the smallest figure among the large economies, and we are the third country after Lithuania and Finland if the drop in GDP is concerned, and lower cut in unemployment, and our predictions for third and fourth quarter allow us to look into the future with moderate optimism. Of course, it is the moment for stabilization, when we speak about development, on how to make Europe get back on the growth pathway again. And the growth path we have been dreamed also before COVID-19. It is not by mere chance that in the recent 10 years the leaders, the European corporations disappeared from the list of largest worldwide companies. In the first big five, there is no single European company. Therefore, this discussion was initiated on the Forum of Europe several years ago, a dozen or so years ago, and on getting the discussion on getting back and setting the trends rather than following them. This discussion started long ago, and unprecedented 2.5 billion euros. This is the funds. We are the largest beneficiary, 160 billion euros for the reconstruction of funds, which will start operating in Polish economy, which will provide security not only for here and now, but will let us contribute to creating the basis for growth for the years to come, to let us create the trends which will be the mega trends, because ability to create mega trends, both in social terms and also in economy, this was lost by Europe in the past decade. Thank you very much. Thank you. And yes, the European leaders have understood severity of the moment, and they have changed their attitudes in recent months. Thank you very much.
Petraszko, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Agriculture of Ukraine. I understand the key person in managing the economy in this turbulent time. Ukrainians are the society with the great aspirations you see the Ukraine among developed countries, but at the same time you faces over the last few decades a lot of challenges. This year another challenge has come, which is pandemia. how you see the prospect of your society, Ukraine, this year and in coming years. And maybe one question, do you believe that more advanced countries, more developed countries, of course the richer countries, should be more involved in supporting these developing countries? There were a discussion among G20 about some debt forgiveness for developing countries. Do you believe that they should commit to more effort to support developing countries?
Yeah, thank you for good questions, and thank you organizers and also government of Poland for inviting us to speak, me to speak on this event. And to start with the question, challenges, to my opinion, are always good, but only in case if you can learn from that and you can grow. There has been expectation that there will be a crisis soon. And when we were living in 2019, we were thinking, okay, there is 11 years of unprecedented growth, global, and there should be something according just to simple economic principles and statistics. But nobody actually knew what the reason for the crisis will be. And we learned that the reason can be not only economic in nature, but can be health related. And we all started in January, February. Ukraine a little bit later in March faced new threat, new challenges that completely redefined the global economy. Obviously, the changes has been happening even before that, with tensions between United States and China, with the global climate change, which influenced many aspects of economies. But new pandemic has made this even more obvious that only working together countries can survive such challenges without ruining the economies. And there has been many different examples how the countries reacted, including Ukraine, which entered a little bit later all the process of COVID. But the lesson which we are seeing right now is that we will be living in a new world, and we are living in the new world now. We should learn fast, because a closing economy, and I think most of the countries understood this already, is not an option. Decline in GDP and people losing job for a prolonged period of time is not an option. So I will actually speak about Ukrainian solutions, maybe, that I think we managed quite well so far. Is that introduction so-called limited quarantine and selective quarantine on the places and cities and not the regions there. And when we started in March and April, we obviously did similar moves as many our neighboring countries like European Union and others that was restrict travel, restrict small businesses that work in the retail, and this was quite hard. But at that point of time, it was possible because people had fear before the new virus. As we learned, we prepared our health system to cope with the virus, because the worst thing is when there is a panic. And we managed to survive the panic quite well. There was no panic in Ukraine. And we started to open up the economy quite quickly. So our economic indicators obviously are not significantly different from neighboring countries and the regions, but still quite well. So we project for this year the overall decline in GDP in Ukraine as 4.8%. And the 6 months GDP decline actual is 6.2. So we, in fact, are going even better than we hoped for. But at the same time, we are facing new second wave, which is coming, and many think that we are already in that. But I think we are much more prepared and all countries are more prepared to that. So for us, we learned to help the businesses that are in need, to help people that need support in terms of their salaries, and what is most important, keeping the jobs. Unemployment, when we started in April, we eased out all limitations on people getting like the unemployment support, because it's very important that society should have salaries there and means to live, and to prepare like to go to employment once the lockdown is over. We also introduced like innovative things like the temporary unemployment, as we call it, when we paid the businesses not to lay off people for some period of time or to maintain the number of people there. And there has been lots of, like in Ukraine was 400,000 people who used this temporary unemployment benefits, and in the last 2 weeks, this number dropped very significantly, like tenfold. So we do see that the economy starts to recover. At the same time, the danger is growing number of new cases there. So we try to solve this issue by increasing number of beds in the hospitals there, well equipped with the oxygen, and there are new, obviously, medical solutions to treating the coronavirus exist. So second, we are not locking down regions anymore. At the same time, we introduce like different stage levels depending on the number of people sick in the region, based on the green, yellow, and red zone. And what is more also interesting, that many industries changed, and the popular word digitalization started actually to move much faster than ever expected. Schools. 1st of September always is the start of the school year. It has been a great challenge for every country. And what we see right now, that the many schools start introducing the home study, the studies through different internet possibilities like Zoom and other facilities. And surprisingly, many children now do not want to go to school, so they want to study from home. This is another learning that we have. So we learned that many people can work from home, and this process has been going for years, but it was going very slow. Now we all understand that maybe not all people have to go to the offices, and this is also a transformation. That's what I have started, that the challenges is always opportunities if we can use them right. So for the upcoming year, we are quite optimistic there. We have projected GDP growth of 4.6%, and I think we can actually deal with that if we continue moving on that path. Obviously, we'll be learning from the European Union and United States in particular how to work in the economic crisis, because again, we are facing also economic difficulty, and as the Deputy Prime Minister correctly pointed out, recessions. Recessions, it's low inflation and low GDP before the world average there. And that's a big challenge, because we all learned that inflation, high inflation is good. But there is also a second tweak in the economic series, always that low inflation is also as bad as high. And we know the examples of Japan, which has been fighting low inflations for decades and hasn't been able actually to find a solution. So our challenge as well is to recover from the recession, not to allow the countries to slip to recession for too long, and resume economic growth as soon as we can. So we already plan in the fourth quarter that the economic growth in Ukraine will start to open. What is very important for Ukraine in particular, I can comment as well, world also learned that now is the time for economic cooperation in blocks, as we call it, bloc countries. So there is a 5-year as EU-Ukraine association agreement, and that's a very important landmark. Because in the cases, in the crisis situation when there is a danger to health, only a group of countries can effectively survive and manage economies. That's why we do see that there are limitations on trade, especially between the global major powers like China, European Union, United States, but there is increase in opportunities that exist within the economic blocks, and I would like to say that EU-Ukraine, we view this as also economic blocks. Obviously not as open yet as we would like to, but this is a 5-year period of time, and now there will be also another round of discussions how to even open economies further between Ukraine and the European Union, and we hope here for support of Poland as well as our advocate in European Union for many, many years. Probably will stop now to allow for further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We just had 2 economic policy leaders. Now we are moving to 2 business leaders, and I have a question to Mark Boris Adrianic from Uber. Uber is called one of the disruptive technologies. And of course, these disruptive technologies play an important role in the progress in the development process. According to the Schumpeterian view, you have the creative destruction. Of course, I must say that pandemia was not so much creative. It was mostly the destruction, but at the same time, we have learned that technologies could be a good answer also in fighting these challenges. How do you see, from your perspective, what kind of role could technology play now in the recovery of the economy?
Thank you very much for this question. It's a pleasure and indeed an honor to be with you today. Now, let me start by quoting Winston Churchill, who once famously said, "If you're going through hell, just keep going." And it's absolutely true that we're facing an unprecedented public health crisis, as well as a devastating economic meltdown. In the second quarter alone, as you mentioned, we lost over 5 million jobs in the European Union, while our economy is contracted by almost 12% altogether. Uber has suffered a lot as well. Our rides business was down 80% as cities locked down many months ago. So this is definitely something that all of us felt and all of us suffered. But let me not depress you too much. I think there's also a very positive story here to tell. And that's a story of resilience, it's a story of solidarity, and it's a story of innovation, as you mentioned. Now, when it comes to resilience, we have seen, as Minister Emilievich mentioned before, how resilient the CEE economies actually are. The contraction here in this region was smaller than in the rest of Europe, and we're seeing stronger signs of recoveries than in many other places. And that's, I think, incredibly encouraging, and it's also the testament to an effective and timely actions by the Polish government and many other governments in the region. Now, also we as Uber have seen much stronger recovery in CEE than in other parts of Europe. Not only have we managed to expand in this period, but we also managed to launch 4 new cities in Central and Eastern Europe in the past couple of months. Now, when it comes to solidarity, and that's, I think, a really important point, we have seen everyone coming together to support the relief effort. Partnership of all kinds and sizes emerged between governments, corporations, cities, and NGOs. Uber, for example, joined forces with major hospitals and major city administration to provide over 10,000 free rides to the frontline workers. We also worked closely with McDonald's and Costa to ensure free meals for the healthcare workers in Warsaw. Now, when it comes to innovation, and that's a really interesting point, this crisis has actually triggered a lot of new business models and in many ways accelerated the digital transformation as people adjusted to the new normal. Now, we were, as Uber, very quick to start expanding our food delivery business, for example, when the lockdown started. Now, our food delivery services have jumped almost twofold in this period, and I must say that these services in general, not just by Uber, but by all the participants in the market, ensured that thousands of local restaurants were saved from bankruptcies, while at the same time millions of customers were served ready meals as well as groceries. Now, since safety is Uber's #1 priority, we try to deploy as much of cutting-edge technology as possible, really to make sure that our services achieve the highest safety standards out there. For example, we implemented a number of software features, including face mask recognition, which means that a driver cannot use our app unless he's wearing a face mask. We were also the first ones, obviously, to deploy face masks, separators that separate drivers from riders, as well as disinfectants. So this crisis was an opportunity, in a way, for us to innovate and come up with better solutions in the areas of safety and, obviously, health. Now, when it comes to the economic recovery, we are extremely optimistic about the CEE's outlook in this area, and I must say that our commitment is stronger today than it has ever been. We believe that the economic recovery, both here as well as in Europe, should be based, I think, on 3 major pillars, with the first one obviously being safety, the second one work flexibility, and the third one sustainability. Now, as I mentioned before, we will work very hard to remain the safest mobility option for millions of people in Poland and across the CEE, but we will also do our best to generate tens of thousands of new flexible work opportunities in the upcoming period in Poland as well as in the rest of the region. We believe in e-mobility. We believed in it before the crisis, and we believe strongly in electric mobility also today. So we will definitely try to expand our fully electric service, Uber Green, to many more cities across the region. So yes, we are here and we are not giving up.
Dziękuję bardzo. Teraz mam pytanie.
Thank you very much. My question now is to Mr. Lajlak, head of Lidl Poland. But before I ask my question, I've got an anecdote. My wife, just about the end of last February, she saw on the TV, she saw clips, videos from showing queues in front of shops and empty shops, empty shelves, and she asked, well, what happens? Why are they doing so? Nothing happened. But then about the second week in March, she wanted me to go to the shops and buy some more things before they closed down the shops, right? So that shows that when these pandemic effects were developing, the people were becoming less and less confident in the services available on the market, and new challenges were coming, logistic things like deliveries which were threatened, and the safety of the customers and the safety of the shop patrons. So what is your perspective? What are the conclusions you can draw from when you look at the change on the way that markets and trade works? Well, thank you for your questions. First of all, great thanks for inviting me to this honorable convention and to give me the ability to speak. Madam Minister, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a difficult time, and it still is quite difficult. But as we said, that kind of experience builds up and strengthens relations and cooperation. Well, but first, I want to respond to what Madam Prime Minister said. These days, what most important was solidarity, trust, and cooperation. In crisis times, these are the values that not only allow you to overcome the crisis, but also allow you to get out of it stronger and tied by stronger cooperation links. You mentioned end of February and the beginning of March. Well, that was an interesting time for me, because on March 1st I took my position, so I came to work and immediately I had to cope with what was happening. I was very nicely surprised by the approach shown by my people, my workers, and the way in which we could work with them, and the suppliers too. The trust. Both groups had to work but only thanks to the very strong trust we had in each other. All people were determined to cope, to manage, to operate in this new situation, for which a high and strong trust was absolutely indispensable. So a very good example of that was the payments. Payments before we were, payments. Lidl Poland was making the payments long before the deadline, long before the date by which the payment had to be done. We paid over 340 million zlotys paid in advance, in fact, just to build stronger confidence. Our goal was to reach the stable, sustainable development and growth, so that our suppliers and our internal partners are satisfied. It's 23,000 people in my company, excellent people they are, and they helped us to go through that difficult time. You mentioned empty shops, no goods on the shelves, right? Yes, we are all afraid of things we do not know, and the COVID-19 was something very new and absolutely unknown to us. We were flooded in bad news from Western Europe. We could see the disaster in the West. We could see it on the TV. And the challenge for us was how to deliver to the people food in time, and of course also the cleaning stuff and all people need to live normally. So that was a huge challenge, but I believe we managed to march through it quite successfully. Of course, I must stress the great role all my people played and all this segment of the market played. It turns out that this is a profession which has a mission, because our mission is to deliver food in time. The mission of Lidl is to deliver food at the lowest possible prices, and the logistic problems were quite important issues, We not only paid in advance, but we also managed to negotiate with our suppliers so that we could guarantee our deliveries to our customers. And we saw the Polish business we found it very, very flexible, absolutely flexible and quick in reaction. Well, there is a big company that makes stockings, and they are our long-time supplier. Now we wanted to distribute safety masks, so that stocking manufacturer started to make masks for our customers, and we distributed that. They saved their jobs, first of all, and we could meet the demand on the market. So both sides, both partners were happy. It was a kind of win-win situation. Another example, flowers. Ladies and gentlemen, you must remember how dramatically demand for flowers dropped in March and April. Nobody was buying flowers at all. And we decided to take all the planned deliveries so that they keep their jobs, because we wanted them to survive, to continue to be our suppliers. So despite that slump on the market, we continued working as usual. The continuous logistic chain at that time was a huge challenge. There were much more examples like those two I mentioned. Many dairy producers, dairies, an excellent Polish company in the south of Poland, quickly rearranged their business, and they started to deliver different products because they were needed on the market. So when the environment changes, the companies swiftly changed too. As I mentioned, the chain of supplies, I want to mention one more thing. We're talking about Poland, of course, now. A very important day was April 1, when there was the limit of 3 customers in front of the cash desk in the shop, not more. That was a huge problem. And the lines, the queues in front of the shops, well, first they formed because people wanted to buy more for later, and then we realized that we can deliver food and everything to the shops, so there is no need to make big reserve shoppings. But on April 1, it was a time when the pandemic was growing, and finally the government decided to impose that limit of 3 customers, maximum 3 customers at the cash desk. So that was a challenge, and how could we solve it? Well, with the great help of our people, our employees, and their determination and commitment, we could manage to do it. Just within a few hours, Mr. Morawiecki, the Prime Minister, said on March last that this limit will be imposed, and we needed just 10 or so hours to extend the opening hours of our shops until midnight. And then many our stores were working around the clock. It was shortly before the Easter. People wanted to buy more, and they found our shops and supermarkets open 24 hours round the clock, because our mission was to distribute, to deliver to our customers whatever they need. So we were able very quickly to open our shops and keep them open around the clock. So, many customers were coming at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they could do it because we were there and we were open. So, as Madam Emilewicz said, only mutual trust and determination to get out of the crisis together and jointly with the mutual help, and then continue growing and developing together. It was only possible in this way. Trust and confidence helps to survive the crisis, and it fills us with optimism for further cooperation when the crisis will be finally over. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your story, because it shows what actually was happening in the recent months here. We know a lot of stories where the cooperation between the government and the business was the main factor of successful management and administration in the country. I invite you to the website Solidarni Zwyciężymy, Solidarity and Victory. That's where you can see how and read how different companies managed to, how they behaved during the crisis. Now my question to Madam Emilewicz is the following. The government decided to offer unprecedented help to Polish businesses to save them and to avoid mass unemployment. But at the same time, the government had to trust the managers and companies and businesses, because a lot of that help and assistance went to them only against the statement that we need some help. You believed those people that what they say is true. As far as I know, you are an advocate of the best possible cooperation between these two spheres, business and government. And my second question is, probably businesses will slow down or halt the investment. So what are you going to do to avoid this? Yes, that was a time of confidence. We know a lot of anecdotes and stories about that time. People were afraid whether we will buy food or not. Is it possible to buy this and that? So we managed to overcome all that owing to cooperation with the logistics centers, supermarket store chains, and we have analyzed these chains of distribution, chain of food distribution, chain of supplies, and we realize better, we better understand those mechanisms. The first safety restrictions and regimes were introduced in those areas, those spheres. Poland was lucky to get 80% of food from its own territory. I believe that the fear that there might be a shortage of toilet paper, but it wasn't there. So we first of all had to manage the sense of safety. Now, as regards the confidence in the businesses, well, the smallest companies were in the greatest need of help. They needed to be helped first. A lot of businesses were just closed down by the law, and they had no reserve capitals, no capital financial cushions. They could not just survive, and they would not be able to pay the obligatory social insurance premiums and other charges. So we decided to we decided that we will recognize just the statements. If somebody says they need support, we believe they do. And the social insurance company was collecting statements from people, but they were too elaborate, so people didn't like it, and they reduced the number of pages, and there was just one-page form. People were submitting, companies were submitting to the company, and then they were getting support. So as the minister said, this digitization sped up too, in Poland too. We gone through so many processes very quickly, but in the normal times we would do it during 5 or 7 years. In this way, under the pandemic conditions, we did it much, much faster. And the digital channels were made ready for service very swiftly. Mr. Boris understands that we are the advocates of the partner-like approach and partner-like cooperation. Every new law proposed by the government and by the ministry, my ministry, were usually a very long process for a long time, but there was a lot of work done on them. We consulted the market, of course, and now I want a kind of initiative to stay with us forever. It is a kind of a dream that the previous government could not have. We want the economic committee of the government we want to transform into a tech committee like they have in Britain. That would be a deregulation committee. Those people would insist that every ministry that drafts some law must at the same time cancel some other regulation. So you can only replace one for one. One in, one out. That would be a good effect of the COVID-style legislation. We also hope that we have never had so many consultations and discussions and negotiations with the employees, businessmen, and thousands of hours we spent on talking to them and exchanging views during the pandemic time. Of course, a lot of the work from home will stay with us forever, but some of that will have to be brought back to the previous form, because physical contact and presence at work in the office is also necessary. Anyway, many people in my office work from home.
So we have had thousands of consultation talks, and also the entrepreneurs were co-authors of the solutions we have adopted, but we also responded in unprecedentedly fast way when we reintroduced border crossing controls, and I received several tens of phone calls from Polish producers, manufacturers of food, informing me that trucks were standing at the border and queuing in the line. And you know, it is a sensitive merchandise, you know, the food stuff. So we were able to work out this very efficiently and help them very effectively. So our ministry became so accessible as never ever before. So, Mr. President, I hope that it will be a good practice for the years to come. And getting to the second part of your question, the mechanisms and priorities which are essential for the future. You know, indices which are painful. It is drop in investments, 10.10% drop in investments, which were not on the highest of the levels. You know, even before pandemic, is the main focus of us. So that's why we adopted the solution in July, which we also allocated 12 billion in terms of funds for local investments funds. So these funds will help municipalities and voivodeships, the local authorities, to not to stop, to let these investments be stopped. So we know that the local authorities had planned such corrections, but they luckily will not have to plan for these for these stops. So it was 25, even 40% in some cases drops in income tax, for local authorities, and mayors of cities were, complaining about that. So they had to introduce corrections at the end of July, but thanks to the new funds which were allocated, these investments will not have to be stopped. So answering your question, Mr. President, yes, we do want to maintain the investment trends, and especially in the public sector. Why? In the public sector, because more than 5% of the Polish GDP is gained thanks to the public investments, public sector investments, and that's why we don't want any slowdown in this area. So that's why we maintain the level of investments in the public sector. That's the challenge for us, and like central communications port, which is also logistics center hub, the center hub, and also fast railways, fast railroads. So to be able to get to the capital of Poland in 1 hour and a half from any point in Poland, it is a task for us. Also the local investments like pavements, schools, nurseries, kindergartens, these are the public investments. And if we speak about individual investments implemented by individual entities, so the personal income tax, the application only when the dividend is to be paid to the board members, and investments are leviations and also investments in automation, and the entrepreneurs will be able to deduct that from the tax base, and also new solutions which enable reinvestments and will attract foreign investors to locate investments in Poland. And this is the pro-investment package, which will become the new tax scheme reality beginning with the 1st of January 2021. Thank you very much.
For the future, and I believe that currently in the global economy we have few contradictory trends. From one perspective, some people are afraid that so much money were injected to the economy from the fiscal, from the monetary policy, that we are afraid of inflation, and these prospects are more positive, that the recovery will be quite strong, and this stimulus will give very strong boost to the economy. But at the same time, a lot of forecasts still indicates a lot of very serious risk to the global economy. We have weak banking sector in Europe. We have mounting public debt. We have growing unemployment in many places of the world. So we have some slowdown process of growing productivity and innovation. At the same time, we have different trends regarding cooperation, international cooperation. On one hand, we are talking about solidarity, that we should integrate more. We should still continue to support free trade, but there is a lot of interventions, there are a lot of new barriers. We could call it Cold War between China and US in terms of the technology. We have the trend of so-called nearshoring, so that many companies from US or Europe could decide to move the production or service center back to the countries. Do you believe, and the questions to Minister Igor Pietraszko, that there is a bigger chance for more positive scenario for future growth, or rather for more pessimistic? Do you believe that free trade will win, or will we see more barriers? And most important, what do you think whether our region, Ukraine, Poland, and the whole sea region, could potentially benefit for these trends in terms of attracting new investment, or in opposite, that we'll see the outflow of the investment to more developed countries?
Yeah, thank you. Very deep and important, really, questions. It's almost like the economic series come to light.
You have 3 minutes, yeah. Sorry, but because...
No, it's really good, so it's really good. I think the prospects will depend on reaction there. So the reaction of the governments are very important there. Without adjusting of the policies, the prospects will not be that great. So what we see right now, the governments are learning from the past experiences there very quickly. And those that learn will be able to adjust. Free trade agreement, free trade global move will survive, but will survive in a lesser mode than it used to be. And not because of just pandemic. But because of the fundamental shift, and I would say potentially a bigger division in values that has been happening over the last 5-10 years between major blocs. But again, within those blocs, there is enough trade. And the countries in the medium term, like European Union, United States, Ukraine, neighboring countries which are not in EU, will benefit. That's my point of view. To some extent, there will be adjustment in the competition, but again, competition, the Western blocs like United States, Canada, European Union, and Ukraine are based on a more free trade and free rules and competition. Some of the Eastern countries still have a very government-related and support which distort competition. So that has been happening for many years and has been long debates on that. So that is why I believe now the shift has been made. The countries, two major blocs, United States, European Union, will start moving the production closer to their borders, and not only to internal countries. And we have many discussions with United States companies that want to move production from Asia right now. Some of them consider European Union, Central Europe and Eastern Europe there. Some of them consider Ukraine and other countries. And they understand it will be more expensive. There, but there is more safety and security for that, and more understanding in terms of actually also intellectual rights, intellectual property. So maybe it's very hard to answer what we'll see in terms of the new global trade policies, but this will definitely will not be the same as it used to be. So I think we, as a world, are coming to a change in the global trade agreements, and I think WTO will be revisited and renegotiated. So there are many ifs there, but I think the countries are moving and blocs are moving into a different agenda. A lot will depend on the reaction of United States, how they will actually pursue, but so far the steps that they are doing make us believe that there will be global changes into the trade. Second question, in terms of whether I am concerned about the too much money invested into the economies to stimulate and to boost inflation. It also depends. Recently, Federal Reserve of United States started to hint that they do not perceive inflation target as the as a some like unshakable norm. So they still obviously target inflation, but they say there are other things like employment, GDP, which become more important. And this not to say that we should actually have high inflation. No, we should actually have limited but not as it was in the last 5 or 7 years, because jobs are more important. There, like growth in wages are important and real wages are important there, and there's always a combination. So governments have to be careful about injecting way too much money, because at some point of time, that's what I mentioned, that the inflation numbers are low, and it's hard actually, it's also an economic problem to have a low inflation. But if you put too much money, you jump exactly to hyperinflation, and you need to avoid that. So that's why the money invested by government into the economy should be investment into the productive economy, making sure that the businesses work, not just paying social wages and social payments there, because that would mean at some point of time with a lag, maybe 6 to 12 months of too high inflation. But giving businesses which maybe have less productivity because of temporary situation, supporting infrastructure projects which employ people, supporting innovations through digital transformation, and it's a big thing, is good. Putting money into education, whereby employees can reshift and relearn some skills. We can remember like the big transformation of the coal industries around the European Union. Ukraine is going through this right now but there has been also hundreds, thousands, if not millions of people who were working there, but this was done in very right manner, and they learned new jobs. Like the new students didn't actually go to the old industries, but they thought about the new industries, and there are many new industries that can be created and will be created. And I think that the European Union, Ukraine, are greatly possession in the greatest possible way to benefit from that compared to other blocs and countries.
Okay, thank you very much. I was learned that we are just about to finish, so just some closing remarks, if you don't mind, Mark, just 2 minutes regarding the influence of pandemic to some technologies. Before the crisis, we have a trend of sharing economy. So people would like to share some assets. What do you think about that? Whether the pandemic will change this trend and we will have completely new business models?
I think this is a $1 trillion question, but I remain optimistic. I think one of the main lessons that we learned during this pandemic is that hope is not a strategy. You can't just sit still and hope for the best. You need decisive action, you need to act fast. And that goes not just for businesses, but also governments. And it's great to see governments, especially the one in Poland, responding so fast to the needs of the businesses and of the markets. And this is, as I mentioned before, one of the most important contributing factors to the fact that the recession will hopefully be shallower here than elsewhere in Europe. The second thing that I would like to highlight is the need for partnerships on all levels. I already mentioned partnership between the government and the businesses, which has been incredibly strong. But we need partnerships everywhere. In Uber's case, we're very proud to be partnering with traditional taxi drivers and allowing them to earn additional income on our platform and secure new clients. We need to understand that we can only beat this pandemic and the economic challenges that we're facing together. And I think this is the main takeaway for us.
Thank you very much. I końcowe pytanie.
And a final question. Lidl is being associated with a company which is close to us in different housing resorts, and so it is one of major companies in Poland, and it also focuses on technology. So please tell us, do you believe that Poland may develop exports in these difficult times, in these hard times, or do you observe new barriers concerning trade? Thank you very much for this question. Well, Lidl is the shopping venue attended by millions of customers, and the scale of business is really huge. We are a very huge exporter thanks to Lidl Poland. During the year 2018-2019, Polish manufacturers were able to export goods for 5.5 billion zlotys. We are the largest exporter of foodstuffs and agricultural and food products, and there was a general question whether Poland will not be short of food. Of course, we export huge amounts, but to European markets, 241 Polish companies exported, thanks to cooperation with Poland, exported their goods, and it is a huge driving force and huge hope for the future, for development in post-pandemic times. And do I observe barriers? No, I just perceive challenges which the Polish manufacturers are able to cope with perfectly well, and adjusting their products or their services to the international needs. We are a huge exporter of not only foodstuffs and agricultural goods, but also we export know-how from Poland, and Lidl Poland in IT, for example, and also we have got many systems which are being used in other companies all over Europe, like system of automation of orders. And I believe that Polish economy is extremely innovative, and the Polish people are extremely innovative, and they are able to adjust to the changing environments very well, and it really helps companies and economy, and it contributes to the huge hope for the future in Poland, in Polish economy. Thank you very much. If I may try to summarize our discussion in 2 sentences. Well, I understand that leverage for economy, for growth after pandemics will be investments and well-designed investments, and also maintaining active policy and maintaining and building partnership relations between business and and we believe that of key importance are the values we started with, solidarity and integration rather than disintegration, and then selfishness, freedom rather than creating barriers, and of course community and wise leadership, which let us hope that in the nearest years to come will result in global and economy to let it get back to dynamic growth path. Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists, thanks to the listeners, to the audience, and also to the audience online. And I would like to thank you very much I wish you very fruitful debates, and I wish you good health.